Don't skip if you have enemies in your life. Imagine you have an enemy who despises you, who wishes to harm you, and who betrays you. How would you respond to such a person? How would you handle such an adversary? Would you choose violence and aggression? Would you seek revenge? Would you curse and abuse them? Would you harbor hate and resentment? Would you avoid them out of fear? Would you despair and give up? Or would you choose a different, more noble and rewarding path? This path, taught by Allah and His Messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, is followed by the righteous and the successful. It pleases Allah and benefits you. In this video, we reveal 7 Islamic ways to destroy your enemies without fighting. These methods are extraordinary, challenging, and heavenly. They will make you a better Muslim and human being, a winner in this life and the next. These ways allow you to destroy your enemies not by fighting, but by winning their hearts and minds. Ready to learn these amazing methods? Stay tuned and watch till the end, you won't regret it. Lesson 1: Seek refuge in Allah from the evil of your enemies. The foremost way to defeat your enemies without fighting them is to seek refuge in Allah from their evil. Allah is the protector, the helper, and the supporter of believers. He can defend us, assist us, and grant us victory over our enemies, removing the harm and hardship they cause us. Allah says in the Quran, "And if an evil suggestion comes to you from Satan, then seek refuge in Allah. Indeed, He is hearing and knowing." The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, taught us to seek refuge in Allah from the evil of our enemies by saying, "O Allah, we place you before them, and we take refuge in you from their evil." By seeking refuge in Allah, we acknowledge our weakness and dependence on Him, affirming His power and sovereignty over everything. We protect ourselves from Satan's whispers, which may incite us to respond to our enemies with evil or to despair of Allah's help. We trust that Allah will protect, guide, and grant us a way out of our difficulties. Lesson 2: Forgive your enemies and pardon their faults. The second way to defeat your enemies without fighting them is to forgive them and pardon their faults. This may seem counterintuitive or impossible, but it is one of the most powerful and noble ways to deal with our enemies. Forgiveness is not a sign of weakness or cowardice but of strength and courage. It is not a surrender or compromise but a victory and liberation. Allah says in the Quran, "And the retribution for an evil act is an evil one like it. But whoever pardons and makes reconciliation, his reward is from Allah. Indeed, He does not like wrongdoers." The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The strong is not the one who overcomes people by his strength, but the strong is the one who controls himself while in anger." By forgiving our enemies, we free ourselves from hatred, resentment, and anger that consume our hearts and minds. We follow the example of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who was the most forgiving and merciful, even to his worst enemies. He forgave the people of Taif who stoned him, the people of Mecca who persecuted him, the Jewish woman who poisoned him, and the man who killed his uncle Hamza. He forgave all his enemies who embraced Islam and repented. By forgiving our enemies, we also earn Allah's forgiveness and pleasure, as He loves those who forgive and pardon. Allah says in the Quran, "And let them pardon and overlook." Would you not like that Allah should forgive you? And Allah is forgiving and merciful. Lesson 3: Pray for your enemies and make dua for their guidance. The third way to defeat your enemies without fighting them is to pray for them and make dua for their guidance. This may seem even more difficult and strange than forgiving them, but it is one of the most beneficial and generous ways to deal with our enemies. Praying for our enemies is not a betrayal or humiliation but a favor and honor. It is not a curse or harm but a blessing and benefit. Allah says in the Quran, "And not equal are the good deed and the bad. Repel evil by that deed which is better, and thereupon the one whom between you and him is enmity will become as though he was a devoted friend." The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "The supplication of a Muslim for his brother in his absence is readily accepted. An angel is appointed to his side whenever he makes a beneficial dua for his brother. The appointed angel says, 'Ameen,' and may you also be blessed with the same." By praying for our enemies, we show them the true spirit and beauty of Islam, a religion of peace, mercy, and compassion. We follow the example of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who prayed for the guidance of his uncle Abu Talib, his cousin Umar ibn al-Khattab, the people of Taif, and his enemies who fought him. By praying for our enemies, we also benefit ourselves and our ummah, seeking Allah's help and mercy for ourselves and our brothers and sisters. We hope Allah will guide our enemies to Islam, or at least to justice and peace, so they stop harming us and themselves. We also hope Allah will reward us for our patience and sincerity and grant us His love and friendship. Lesson 4. Be kind and generous to your enemies and do good to them. The fourth method to overcome your enemies without engaging in conflict is to show kindness and generosity towards them. Though this might seem like an impossible and irrational approach, it is one of the most effective and wise ways to handle our adversaries. Demonstrating kindness and generosity to those who oppose us is not a waste or loss but an investment and gain. It is not a sign of humiliation or defeat but a display of dignity and triumph. Allah says in the Quran, "And spend in the way of Allah from what we have provided you before death approaches one of you and he says, 'My Lord, if only you would delay me for a brief term so I would give charity and be among the righteous.'" This verse highlights the importance of charity and the urgency of doing good deeds while we still have time. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, also emphasized this by saying, "Give charity without delay, for it stands in the way of calamity." By being kind and generous to our enemies, we demonstrate the best of manners and the highest moral standards, the hallmarks of true believers. We follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who was known for his kindness and generosity even towards his fiercest enemies. For instance, during the Battle of Badr, he provided water to wounded enemy soldiers. After the Battle of Uhud, he ensured prisoners of war were fed and clothed. In Medina, he offered shelter and protection to disbelievers who sought his help. And when the people of Mecca surrendered to him, he granted them amnesty and forgiveness. By showing kindness and generosity to our enemies, we can soften their hearts and diminish their hatred and enmity towards us. This approach transforms their perception and elevates our character. Moreover, we earn the reward and gratitude of Allah, who loves those who are kind and generous. Allah says in the Quran, "Indeed, Allah rewards the charitable, and He is the all-aware of what you do." Thus, let us strive to be kind and generous even towards those who oppose us, following the noble example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and embodying the highest virtues of our faith. May Allah grant us the strength and wisdom to practice this noble conduct and earn His eternal pleasure. Lesson 5. Be patient and steadfast in the face of your enemies and do not fear them. The fifth way to defeat your enemies without fighting them is to be patient and steadfast in the face of their harm and oppression, and to not fear them or their threats. This approach, though challenging and difficult, is one of the most rewarding and honorable ways to deal with adversaries. Patience and steadfastness are not signs of weakness or passivity but manifestations of strength and active resilience. Allah says in the Quran, and we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and a loss of wealth and lives and fruits. But give good tidings to the patient, who, when disaster strikes them, say, Indeed, we belong to Allah, and indeed to Him we will return. Those are the ones upon whom are blessings from their Lord and mercy, and it is those who are the rightly guided. This divine promise emphasizes the significance of patience, leading to blessings and guidance from Allah. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, also highlighted the virtue of patience, saying, How wonderful is the case of a believer! There is good for him in everything, and this applies only to a believer. If prosperity attends him, he expresses gratitude to Allah, and that is good for him. If adversity befalls him, he endures it patiently, and that is better for him. This hadith underscores that a believer finds goodness in every situation, whether in times of ease or hardship, by expressing gratitude or enduring patiently. By maintaining patience and steadfastness, we convey to our enemies that we are unfazed by their plots and schemes, demonstrating our unwavering trust in Allah's plan and wisdom. This approach mirrors the exemplary conduct of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, who exhibited unparalleled patience and perseverance in the face of severe trials. He endured persecution and boycott in Mecca, physical and verbal abuse in Taif, loss of loved ones, betrayal and treachery in Medina, and numerous battles against his enemies. By being patient and steadfast, we earn the support and help of Allah, who loves those who are patient and rewards them abundantly. Allah says in the Quran, Indeed, the patient will be given their reward without account. Therefore, let us cultivate patience and steadfastness, seeking Allah's guidance and strength, and overcoming adversities with dignity and resilience. May Allah grant us the fortitude to endure trials and the wisdom to navigate challenges with unwavering faith, earning His eternal pleasure and blessings. Lesson 6. Seek reconciliation and peace with your enemies and do not seek revenge. The sixth way to defeat your enemies without fighting them is to seek reconciliation and peace with them and not to seek revenge or retaliation. This way may seem unrealistic or unwise, but it is one of the most rational and beneficial ways to deal with our enemies. Seeking reconciliation and peace is not a sign of defeat or surrender but of maturity and intelligence. It is not a compromise or concession but a solution and a resolution. Allah says in the Quran, And if they incline to peace, then incline to it also, and rely upon Allah. Indeed, it is He who is the hearing, the knowing. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, Do not wish to meet the enemy, but when you meet, face them, be patient. By seeking reconciliation and peace with our enemies, we prevent further bloodshed and violence, which may harm us and our enemies. We also avoid the cycle of revenge and retaliation, which may escalate the conflict and prolong the enmity. We follow the example of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who always preferred reconciliation and peace over fighting and revenge. He made peace treaties with his enemies, such as the Treaty of Hudaybiyah with the Quraysh, the Pact of Medina with the Jews, and the Covenant of Najran with the Christians. He also forgave his enemies who sought peace, such as Abu Sufyan, who embraced Islam before the conquest of Mecca, and Hind bint Utbah, who mutilated his uncle Hamza. By seeking reconciliation and peace with our enemies, we also earn the pleasure and reward of Allah, who loves those who seek peace and justice. Allah says in the Quran, And reconciliation is best. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, Shall I not inform you of something more excellent in degree than fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, sadaqah? They, the people, said, Yes, Prophet of Allah. He said, It is putting things right between people, spoiling them is the shaver, destructive. Lesson 7. Remember that Allah is the ultimate judge and avenger of your enemies and trust in His justice. The seventh and final way to defeat your enemies without fighting them is to remember that Allah is the ultimate judge and avenger of your enemies and trust in His justice and wisdom. This way may seem passive or naive, but it is one of the most profound and realistic ways to deal with our enemies. Remembering that Allah is the ultimate judge and avenger is not a denial of reality or responsibility, but an affirmation of faith and trust. It is not an escape or excuse but a submission and acceptance. Allah says in the Quran, "And do not think Allah to be unaware of what the wrongdoers do. He only delays them for a day when eyes will stare in horror." The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Beware of the supplication of the oppressed, for there is no barrier between it and Allah." By remembering that Allah is the ultimate judge and avenger, we relieve ourselves from the burden of seeking justice and revenge on our own. We also avoid the pitfalls of injustice and oppression, which may lead us to commit sins and incur Allah's wrath. We follow the example of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who always trusted in Allah's justice and wisdom, even when he was wronged and oppressed. He prayed to Allah to deal with his enemies, such as Abu Jahl, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, and Abdullah ibn Ubay. He also reminded his companions of Allah's justice and warned them against oppressing others. By remembering that Allah is the ultimate judge and avenger, we also earn Allah's protection and reward, who loves those who are just and trust in Him. Allah says in the Quran, "And whoever relies upon Allah, then He is sufficient for him." The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Allah is with the oppressed one until he overcomes." Conclusion. In conclusion, these are the 7 Islamic ways to destroy your enemies without fighting them. They are not easy or simple, but they are the best and most effective ways to deal with your enemies. They will make you a better Muslim and human being, and they will please Allah and benefit you. They will also win the hearts and minds of your enemies and turn them into your friends. May Allah help us to follow these ways and grant us His protection and guidance. Ameen. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more Islamic videos. And don't forget to leave your comments and feedback below. Until next time, Assalamu Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.